About his amazing career. He's assistant to the President and Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economic Affairs. He serves as the White House liaison to the G7, G8, and G20, and I bet you he's got an amazing volume of frequent flyer miles from all that travel. He's been responsible for coordinating policy on international trade, investment, energy security, and climate change, and development and democracy issues. He and European Commissioner Karl de Gucht also currently chair the Transatlantic Economic Council, the political body that oversees and accelerates government-to-government cooperation with the aim of fostering greater economic integration between the United States and Europe. He just came back from a fantastic trip to Tanzania, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Nigeria, where he was discussing economic opportunities in sub-Saharan Africa. He has an amazing educational background, which includes degrees from Princeton, Harvard, Oxford University, and prior to joining the Obama administration, Mike was managing director at Citigroup, where he managed infrastructure and sustainable development investments. He also served as the president and chief executive officer of Citi Insurance. He spent much of his career at the Treasury Department, serving as Secretary Rubin's right hand, and also as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Eurasia and the Middle East. So, I mean, if you think about his career, you can't ask for a better advocate on behalf of the business community on all things trade liberalization, and most importantly on trade and services. And so with that, Mike, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you, Laura. And after that introduction, I'm sure to disappoint you. Well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, I've heard about this summit for many years, but this is actually the first one that I've come to, and it's a remarkable gathering. I see so many friends in the audience, so many alumni of the trade world in government, and it really is an important community that you all represent. And never before, your work has never been more important than it is now with your new agenda, services, the new agenda. I think this really is the time for that new agenda. Whether it's telecommunications, environmental services, financial services, audiovisual or express delivery services, this administration is committed to pursuing a policy agenda that is premised on the fact that services create jobs, connect our world, enhance competition, and strengthen innovation. And I don't need to tell this audience how important services are as a source of strength in the U.S. economy, domestically and internationally. And we are committed to doing everything we can to ensure the health and the opportunity of the services sector. Just look at our domestic economy. When the president took office, the U.S. was in the midst of a deep recession, losing about 800,000 jobs a month and threatening the economic security of millions of middle-class Americans. There was a real possibility that that recession would turn into a depression. So the president took a number of unprecedented steps at home and abroad, and they worked. Though much remains to be done, we are growing. We've experienced now 30 straight months of private sector job growth, creating 4.6 million jobs. And as we continue to create new, well-paying jobs, we know that services are an important part of that equation. Services account for somewhere between 70 and 80% of the U.S. economy. Roughly 4 out of 5 Americans are employed in services. A quarter of that workforce is comprised of finance, engineering, research and development, and software jobs. Jobs that pay an average wage of $56,000. And a large percentage of the new jobs being created are in the well-paying areas of professional, business, information, education, healthcare, and utility services. You know, sometimes people ask, what do we care about most? Is it manufacturing or is it services? And I think the answer is clear, it's both. And in fact, it's a false distinction. It's absolutely clear that success in services goes hand in hand with the president's manufacturing agenda. Growing manufacturing jobs in America is a bright spot in our economy and will continue to be a priority. But services are very much part of that success. Take the auto industry. Roughly 20% of the jobs in the auto industry are services jobs, such as engineers and designers. GM recently announced that it was hiring hundreds of new information technology workers, as cars now rely on up to 10 million lines of code to get out of your driveway. And increasingly, when American manufacturers sell their goods, a growing part of their business is the service contract that goes with the sale. GE Aviation, for example, has developed a My Engines software application to pair with its engine sales. The application provides 24/7 real-time fleet and engine performance data for analysis by engineers and other service experts. Now this morning you heard from Ambassador Kirk about the breadth of our trade agenda, and I'll try not to repeat what he said this morning. But let me underscore that as this administration looks to foreign markets to increase exports and create more jobs, U.S. service exports jumped to more than $600 billion last year, accounting for nearly 1/3 of our total exports. We have a $180 billion trade surplus in services. It's a true success story and a key part of our effort to double exports and create 2 million new jobs supported by exports over 5 years under the President's National Export Initiative. Our international trade record is strong. This administration succeeded in improving the trade agreements with Korea, Colombia, and Panama, laying the foundation for unprecedented bipartisan support. Implementation of KORUS opened Korea's $580 billion services market, including the financial services, express delivery, and our burgeoning information technology services sector. We've greatly expanded our enforcement effort, including through the creation of the Interagency Trade Enforcement Center. And we've used our powers in cases like the China electronic payments case to ensure that countries live up to their commitments. And we worked hard to bring nearly 20 years of negotiations to a close and lay the foundation for Russia's accession to the WTO, including key market opening commitments for financial services, telecommunications, and audiovisual services. We're now working with Congress to terminate Jackson-Vanik, to authorize the President to grant permanent normal trade relations so that our companies and workers can benefit from Russia's commitments. Services exporters are among the ones who have the most to gain from PNTR and the most to lose by congressional inaction. We call on Congress to get this done as soon as possible. But this is really just the beginning. Looking ahead, we see major opportunities to shape the international trading system and expand U.S. goods and services exports in the process. Our trade policy has been premised on 3 core strategies. On the multilateral front, we inherited a Doha round that was deadlocked for reasons that are well known. For a while, it seemed like we were the only ones in the world willing to declare it so. But over the last 3.5 years, with the President's leadership, we've been able to build a global consensus to turn the page and to begin to make progress on multilateral issues where progress is possible, including a multi-party service region of the world, and with the European Union, our deepest and broadest economic relationship, to determine how best to achieve the highest standard, most ambitious set of trade arrangements to date. And on the development front, we have engaged with our partners to focus on specific actions that will increase economic activity in the short and medium term, including breaking down barriers at the border and promoting regional and global integration. Let me just focus on 3 specifics. First, we looked at the dynamism of the Asia Pacific, the fastest growing market in the world, with nearly half the world's trade. As a Pacific nation, we saw that we had the opportunity to work with like-minded countries to help shape the region's future economic architecture and to introduce into the bloodstream of the international trading system new disciplines, higher standards, maximum ambition. With 6, later 8, and soon to be 10 other TPP partners, we are working to craft a high standard 21st century trade agreement that can serve as a platform for regional economic integration. We now have 14 rounds of negotiations behind us, and we've made substantial progress on key services priorities. For example, we're negotiating in the TPP to create new provisions to ensure fair competition in express delivery services, an industry that contributes an estimated $80 billion. Broad binding commitments covering the cross-border transfer of information, the lifeblood of IT-based services. And to further cloud-based services, we see commitments ensuring that U.S. companies can leverage their investments in state-of-the-art data centers to supply services on a global scale. The services commitments we're negotiating in TPP are important for the access they'll provide to the growing markets of the Asia Pacific. But they take on added significance when you recognize that TPP is being developed as a potential platform for regional integration as a whole, as well as a possible template for how these emerging issues might be addressed in future broader trade agreements. Second, we looked at our existing trade and investment relationship with the European Union, determined to make it even stronger. We know the transatlantic economic relationship is the world's largest, and in many areas, one of the smoothest and barrier-free. U.S. exports of goods and services to the EU were roughly $460 billion last year, including $190 billion in services. And that supports almost 2.3 million jobs. But we think we can do more and we can do better. So last year, the President joined with European leaders in calling for a high-level working group on jobs and growth to examine all of the options to expand our trade and investment. And we're working now to get the substance right, including for our services industries. But we're clear-eyed when dealing with this initiative and this challenge. If we're going to go down this road toward a comprehensive agreement, we don't want to get stuck in a ditch or at a dead end. We want to know where the potholes are in advance, and that we can get to our destination on one tank of gas. I'm looking at Mark here because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. And that's why we're insistent on working through the historically difficult issues up front to get a sense of whether there's a path that makes sense for both of us. Third, we stand strongly behind the current efforts in Geneva to negotiate an international services agreement. Along with 20 ambitious, like-minded, and forward-looking economies, this administration sees the ISA as the biggest development in global services trade in nearly 2 decades. We view this as an opportunity to create a platform to consolidate the highest level of services liberalization achieved by participants while providing for expanded market access and new rules and disciplines. Furthermore, we see the chance to extend that framework to a broader set of economies, and someday to the WTO as a whole, as another effort to reinvigorate the multilateral trading system. Now is the time to focus on direct, substantive negotiations, good old-fashioned request and offer. We don't need more process, we don't need more formulas, we need everyone to roll up their sleeves and get to work. Now, we focused on how our broad services agenda contributes to creating jobs, increasing exports, and stimulating growth for the U.S. economy. But let me spend a minute on how the services agenda extends to another key priority of this administration, and that's our development agenda. Services are too often viewed as the prerogative of developed economies, but that's not the full picture. Services sectors in developing countries are growing as a share of output and employment. Services are a priority in the developing world. After all, good logistics, transportation, distribution, communication, and financial services are all key to helping all sectors of an economy grow and develop. Access to information and communication technologies can actually help some economies leapfrog traditional paths of economic development. I was struck at the G20 this year how it was the representatives of the developing countries, Benin on behalf of the African Union, Cambodia on behalf of ASEAN, who advocated most strongly for the trade facilitation agreement being negotiated in Geneva. They, more than anyone else, understand how barriers and bottlenecks impede trade, make it more difficult to get product from farm to market, and impose a heavy tax on the poorest nations. Understanding these priorities, we're working with the East African community and countries in the Middle East and North Africa on trade facilitation initiatives to reduce the thickness of borders by simplifying procedures such as single border clearance and harmonized customs documentation. With better policies and some targeted technical assistance, we can make way for logistics, transportation, delivery, and distribution services, which bring with them opportunities for trade and more diverse economic growth and greater prosperity. Similarly, around the world, increased attention is being paid to the infrastructure deficit, the need for more investment in the basic road, rail, air, and shipping infrastructure that makes economic growth possible and the international trading system operate. Tomorrow, at the State Department, we'll be hosting a conference on how U.S. firms can participate in the infrastructure boom around the world. And the bulk of the US firms participating in that conference are services firms, firms that are providing design, engineering, project management, and financial services to make these projects happen. The same could be said about energy. There's an energy boom happening around the world, from Africa to Latin America, and our firms are well positioned to provide the services necessary to bring those resources online and to where they need to be, safely, securely, and efficiently. In each of these areas, our firms have a lot to offer and a lot of services to export. And this administration is committed to doing what it can to promote those exports. The Trade and Development Agency, OPIC, and EXIM are working more closely than ever before amongst themselves and with USTR, Commerce, State, Treasury, and others to make sure that every possible resource is put to use and every opportunity is pursued. And this is part of a broader effort to make our trade promotion efforts better, including by engaging in smarter, more targeted export counseling for 15,000 American companies and concerted advocacy efforts that have helped our companies win over $160 billion in government contracts. So let me conclude where I began. Services are a critical part of the US economy, and increasing their export is a critical part of creating growth and jobs here at home, as well as contributing to the development of markets abroad. We welcome the partnership we've had with CSI, which has been a valuable source of feedback as we work through these issues, and we look forward to our continued partnership as we work to shape an international trading system that provides even greater opportunity for the services industry. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having me.